Welcome to Fate 40 and Beyond. I'm Jen. I am your host. Fate 40 and Beyond is a podcast for women in midlife. We talk about all the things with a little bit of woo mixed in. Today is a mini episode, and we are definitely talking about the woo. Outside of the podcast, I'm the owner of Soulful Existence, where I work with clients one-on-one all across the world. And I help them to come back to alignment with their higher self through tarot, mediumship, and past life regression. I'm also the owner, developer, founder, I don't know what it's called, of an app, a new app that I'm launching next week. And I want to just mention it right now because it's something I'm incredibly proud of. It's coming out fully on June 14th. I forgot what month we were in. It is called the Cosmic Brief. It is an astrology app that is essentially meant to help with the day-to-day energetic makeup of astrology and help you figure out how that works in your life, specifically through your natal chart, current transits, and even your calendar. It integrates your calendar from Google or Apple, which is pretty amazing. I always wanted something like that, so I made it myself. That comes out. You can check show notes for a link on that. But anyways, back to the podcast. Today is a mini episode, and I wanted to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, tarot. And I know it sounds scary to anyone who has never done tarot before, but that's not what this is about. So I want to help dispel or help clarify tarot for decision making, and I'm really excited to dive into this with you. Many of you have already listened to past episodes where I do tarot readings in the episode with a guest, and that's great for digging into individual situations, finding out what the energy is like around all of these live situations that people are going through. But what about when you're curious about how to proceed, how to move forward in life? So that's actually what I wanted to talk about in this episode, and it's worth examining. And I think a lot of people don't quite know how to use tarot in their day-to-day life, and so it's very important to show different options for it. Is it used for? People use tarot for a lot of things like journal prompting or dream analysis or like a reflective practice. So today we're going to talk about what it actually is, what it isn't, and why it works for some people but not others. And then also, does it have any real weight in how you navigate major decision making? So let's go ahead and get into it. So what tarot actually is, and I've kind of done an episode over this before, but this one's going to be a little bit of a different direction. So let's start with basics, because I think a lot of the skepticism comes from a version of tarot that's been distorted by movies, by the whole carnival aesthetic, the lady with the glass fortune telling, what are the glass crystal ball? But I think there's also very specific narratives about what it is and what it isn't. So I want to help lighten the mood a little bit, because I think most people picture a dramatic, woman in dark clothing and a hidden tent turning over the death card and telling you something ominous about the future. But that's not tarot. At least that's not the way I read tarot, and it's not the way any meaningful practice should be approached. So here's what it really is. Stripped down, it's a deck of 78 cards that were used as a game in 15th century Europe before anyone else was using them for divination. Over centuries, the imagery has changed and evolved. The Rider-Waite deck is one of the most recognized decks with imagery, and it wasn't published until 1909. It was deliberately designed by occultists who wanted to encode symbolic meaning into each card. What makes the cards useful isn't magic. There's no magic in the cards. There's no special powers in the cards. But it's the symbolism. The images on the cards are drawn from mythology, astrology, numerology, psychology, and different archetypes. Archetypes that appear across cultures. That's where the magic lies in all of those symbols. So when you pull a card and you look at the image, the brain is doing something very specific. It's pattern matching, and it's looking for meaning. And that act of looking for a meaning, of projecting your situation onto a symbol, is actually useful. Carl Jung called this process active imagination. He was deeply interested in the kind of meaning making that happens when the conscious mind interacts with symbolic imagery. And honestly, that's probably one of my favorite things to study. He wasn't writing about tarot specifically, but the mechanism he described maps onto it almost perfectly. The core idea of this is the conscious mind is very good at processing what you know and what you've been told, what you think you're supposed to do. It's not as good at servicing what you actually feel and what you've been suppressing or what you already know but haven't let yourself say out loud. Symbolic tools, and tarot is one of those, can create a kind of shortcut past all of that noise. So is it woo? Yeah, it depends on what you consider woo. If you believe the cards have magical predictive power that bypasses your own agency, then yeah, that's the belief system I can't argue out of you or you into. But if you understand that tarot is a structured, reflective tool, like a way to externalize your inner state, then it's much closer to, I don't want to say therapy, but that analysis that goes on in your brain than it is to fortune telling. Before we get into how tarot fits into decision making, I want to spend a few minutes on why decision making on its own is genuinely hard. Because I think people underestimate how much is working against them when they try to make a big decision like many of us do on a regular basis. We live in a culture that glorifies decisiveness. You're supposed to just know, trust your gut, be confident. And if you're spending weeks or months going back and forth on a decision, there's usually a quiet narrative in your head that says, something is wrong with me. I just can't figure this out. But what's actually happening in a lot of those cases is you have conflicting values, or you have two or more things that genuinely matter to you, and the decision requires sacrificing one for the other. That's not indecisiveness. That's moral and emotional complexity. And the discomfort you're feeling is accurate feedback, not failure. Or you have fear masquerading as logic. You have already made the decision somewhere in your body, and you know what you want, but your brain is generating very sophisticated reasons not to do it because it's scary. So you keep thinking it through, hoping to arrive at a different answer. Other times, you're just trying to outsource the decision. You've asked everyone you know, you've made a pros and cons list 4 different times, and you're searching for someone or something to just tell you what to do because the weight of ownership feels too heavy. I've been there before. Tarot and any other genuine reflective practice doesn't solve these problems, but it can help you see which one you're dealing with. And that's usually most of the work. There's also something worth naming about midlife specifically. A lot of the decisions that land on us after 40-ish are not logistical. They're existential. Do I stay in this career? Do I stay in this relationship? Do I move? Do I rebuild? These types of decisions carry the weight of time, the time that you've already spent doing the thing that you're thinking about changing, and the time that you have left. The stakes feel different, and the decision-making tools that you're used to in your 20s, maybe like comparison shopping or asking people who've done it ahead of you, making a plan, they don't often reach deep enough. So let's get practical, because I want to walk you through how I would actually sit down with the tarot deck and work through a decision. Not as a fortune-telling exercise, but as structured thinking. Step 1 is to define the decision clearly before you touch the cards. And I think this sounds obvious, but almost nobody does it, so I think it's important to talk about. I would say most people come to any reflective practice, whether it's journaling, therapy, or tarot, the fuzzy understanding of their problem. I don't know what to do about my job. That's not a decision. That's just a cloud. A decision has 2 or more actual options. I'm deciding whether to accept a promotion, which means more money but more travel, or stay in my current role where I have stability but I've plateaued. Those are 2 options. Now you have something to work with. Write it down before you pull a single card so you know what you're dealing with. Pick a simple spread for tarot or just go really simple. A spread is just a layout. Each card position has a meaning. The 3-card spread is the most useful for decisions. Position 1, what's true about option A. Position 2 is what's true about option B. In position 3, what am I not seeing? Or what is the blind spot of this decision? That's it. That's all you need is 3 cards. You don't need this 10-card Celtic cross for a decision. Is it fun? Does it look pretty? Yeah. But you need clarity, not complexity. If you want to go even more stripped down, pull 1 card and ask, what do I need to know most about this decision right now? That single card and your reaction to it will tell you exactly what you need to know. When I tell people I read cards, I do often give them a disclaimer as well, because I read very intuitively. I don't immediately pick up the book that comes with the cards and look up the meaning. I look at the card that I've pulled and I sit with it for a second and I feel into the meaning of the card for myself. There's a lot of different ways to read the cards when you read intuitively, because the symbolism and the feeling, the imagery brings up different emotions, words, images sometimes, depending on the reading itself, where it fits in, what the question originally was, in this case, what your decisions are. But a lot of people skip that part. They pull a card and they immediately reach for the little book and they start reading about what the card's supposed to mean. But honestly, the most valuable information is your gut reaction to the image. Do you feel relief? Do you feel dread? Did you look at it and think, oh my gosh, of course? Or did you look at it and think, oh no, not that card? Because that reaction is information. Write it down. Literally write it down. I have journals from the first few years that I read cards, and I look back at those and realize I was really accurate. And I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I was going off of gut reaction a lot of those times. And then, yeah, you can look up the meaning after that. You can read the traditional interpretation. But I also want you to hold it loosely. The question isn't necessarily, what does this card say I should do? The question is, how does this card's meaning land when I apply it to my situation? The Ten of Swords, for example, classically a card about painful endings, hitting a wall, being defeated. But if that shows up in the position of what's true about option A, how does that land? Maybe it confirms something you've been avoiding. Maybe it feels completely off. Either way, the reaction is useful, right? The next step after you check in with your body about these and check the book is to check whether the reading reflected something back to you that you already knew. One of the things I hear more often in my clients after a reading is, you just confirmed everything I already knew. I just needed to hear it from someone else. And a lot of times that someone else isn't me. The someone else is the cards. I don't know what to tell people. I'm just the messenger. But after you sit with everything and you look at how it applies, this is the test. After you're done with the reading, sit with it for, 24 hours, however long feels right to you, and ask, did I learn something new about the situation? Or did the cards surface something I already knew, but I didn't want to say out loud? And that's pretty often. I would say 90% of the time, it's the second one. And that's not like to tarot down. It's actually the most valuable thing it can do. Getting something from the inside to the outside of us is hard sometimes. And sometimes you need a strange route to get there. So we go through a whole process of actually listening to the cards and tapping into what they're trying to tell you. But let's be real about where tarot falls short and the honest limits, because there's only so much they can do. After all, they are just pieces of paper. Tarot is not a substitute for information. If you're making a financial decision and you don't have the numbers, the cards can't fill that gap. If you're making a medical decision and you haven't talked to the right doctors, no amount of reflection is going to substitute medical advice. There's a version of this practice where people use it to avoid doing actual research, and that's a huge misuse of tarot. It's also not therapy. If you're dealing with trauma that's shaping your decisions, and let's be honest, a lot of us in midlife are dealing with something. A reflective card practice is not going to get to the root of it. It might point you in the right direction. It might name something, but it's not a replacement for working with someone who is actually trained to help you process what's underneath. And this is the most important part, I think. Tarot is not a decision-making shortcut for people who don't want to be responsible for their choices. And I do tend to see this. Not often, but people use it to feel like the decision was made for them, so they don't have to own that decision. The card said this. No, you made a decision about what you wanted to hear the cards say. The cards maybe helped you to see it more clearly, but it's okay to own that. And another honest limitation is that it doesn't work for everyone. Some people are just not wired to see the symbolic language or the image-based reflections. Some people's brains just don't engage with it. If you try it and it feels like nothing, like there's genuinely zero relatability, resonance, that's fine. It's a tool. It's not like you have to use it. If you want to get in shape, you don't have to run. There's plenty of other ways to get in shape. Any practice that creates space between the stimulus and the response can do the same work for you. So here's what I want you to take from this. Whether you pick up a tarot deck is not the point of this. But what I actually want you to think about is this. How do you create conditions for self-reflection? Honest self-reflection before a major decision. Like, what's your practice for that? Because the people who navigate midlife transitions with the most integrity, not necessarily the smoothest and not necessarily the most successful, but the most integrity, are almost always people who have the same method for getting underneath the noise. They're asking themselves what they want, like really actually want, and not just what makes sense and looks good. For some people, that's tarot. For some people, it's therapy. For some people, it is crazy long runs or a long drive or conversations with a friend. The practice matters less than the actual commitment to doing it. If you want to try tarot and you don't know where to start, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck is one of the easiest ones to find, and most people start there. There's also a lot of apps if you don't want a physical deck. I have an app on my phone that every now and then I'll pull a single card with that and just get a blurb of inspiration. I would suggest starting with a single card pull in the morning. Ask one question, sit with it for a few minutes, and then maybe look up the meaning. But that's it. Like, that's a practice. That's a whole practice at the very core of it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking through this very chaotic episode. I feel like, I don't know, today was a weird day. But if this episode stirred up something in you, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me on Instagram or my website's down below, Facebook, any of that. And I would love it if you could share the episode with a friend. Maybe not this one, maybe one of the better ones. Check out the show notes for all of my links, and I'll see you next week.